Taoiseach, over 200 children, either in state care or known to state care, have died since 2014. A fifth of them have died by suicide. Many more have died with drug overdoses, and 11 of those children were murdered. That more than 5% of the children in state care or known to state care have been murdered is absolutely incredible. Will you agree, Taoiseach? A National Review panel that investigated these deaths had alarming things to say about CAMHS. CAMHS has on a number of occasions refused to accept children referred to them by Tusla because they only accept children with treatable or diagnosed mental illness, and they also have a policy of refusing children who use drugs and alcohol. Not children who are addicted to drugs and alcohol, but who use drugs and alcohol. Some of these children have died by suicide. There's something seriously wrong with the system, Taoiseach, that you'll agree with. And we're going to see a lot of TDs in here talk very shortly about child protection, and it'll be highly charged and political. But it is incredible that we have 200 children known to state care or in state care who have died in the last 10 years. I believe that if many of them came from leafy suburbs, if many of them had parents who were well-to-do, who had power, who could influence the debate, that their cases would be far higher on the political priority of this country. But I believe that the fact is they don't have people to speak for them. They don't come from money. They don't come from a background of power. And I would ask the Taoiseach to take the issue of children in state care very, very, very seriously.
Thank you very much, 𝐵𝐵𝐶 𝐸𝐴. Thanks to Deputy Tóibín for raising the important issue of the well-being, safety, protection, mental health needs and others of children in state care. And I think the broad point the Deputy makes about the need for those of us who hold positions of authority to take an active interest in the lives of those who may find themselves without a voice within the system. And I'll certainly raise specifically and directly with Tusla on foot of what the Deputy has raised here in the Dáil, the issue of the 200 children who died in state care over the 10 years, and that piece around the interaction with CAMHS, and I'm happy to correspond with the Deputy and engage further on the issue. Thank you for raising that and giving them a voice in the Dáil today.
Those on the government benches have a duty not just to safeguard children in their own political parties, but also children nationally. There's a history of failing to protect children as a state, the horrific legacy of industrial schools, mother and baby homes and abuse by religious orders in schools. And the government continues to fail in that duty. There are huge staff shortages in Tusla, which mean that at-risk children are continuing to be failed by the state. A 𝐸𝐴 report published a few months ago found that children's care services did not have sufficient staff numbers to provide adequate services to vulnerable young people. It said Tusla has insufficient numbers of appropriately qualified, skilled and experienced staff to provide consistent and timely services to some children. It continued, a significant number of children waiting to access the right service at the right time, and some children were placed in services that were not appropriate to their assessed needs. Meanwhile, earlier this year, a High Court judge warned that nothing is being done about the crisis in our care system and there being a tsunami of cases. But one thing was done by this government. The project that was highlighting these cases and the wholesale failure by government in this area, the Child Law Project, has been shut down. Shamefully, at a time when the government has more money than it knows what to do with, it couldn't find the relative pittance required to fund this project. Earlier this year, the Child Laws Project's latest and now final report described a care system that was utterly dysfunctional and totally overwhelmed. It stated that multiple judges were in despair of the system of care for children in Ireland. Remember, these are some of the country's most vulnerable and traumatised citizens who desperately need the protection and the support of the state. But they are being ignored or abandoned by a system that is completely inadequate and on occasion dangerous. This is what the Child Law Project consistently highlighted since it was established in the teeth of the worst ever recession in 2012. We could afford it back then, but apparently there is no money for it now. 𝐷𝐶 𝐸𝐴, I have to say, I think it is shameful and disgraceful. withdrawing funding has all the appearances of the government seeking to shoot the messenger rather than deal with the issue that they are communicating. And I would urge the Minister to reverse this decision today, because there is a crisis in the care system. Things are so bad that the Children's Residential and Aftercare Voluntary Association have called on the government to conduct an independent review of the children's care system. According to them, and they all work in this area, Tusla and the government are failing to uphold their statutory duty to children and to young people in care. These are the sentiments that have been echoed by the Ombudsman for Children, Paul Muldoon, as recently as a few months ago. Mr Muldoon is quite clear that the state is failing to meet its commitments and obligations to children with disabilities and in-state care, as well as not providing all the school places required.
I'm glad to get the opportunity, and I regret that this debate is taking place around this political row that's going on, and it's not. I don't think it's right. It don't sit right with me either. That the timing of this doesn't appear to be right. No one of us here would stand for the abuse or neglect of children. They're the most vulnerable in our society, and we must seek to protect them at all times. I have questions about Tusla as well, and I have questions for Minister Richard O'Gorman as well, where there's children, Roderick O'Gorman, where there are children missing and not accounted for, and we don't hear that he's doing anything about it, or to allay our concerns, because I don't believe he is. And I can't understand that. When I get told about this in places like Castleisland and Killarney, that people are concerned about children that go missing out of state care, that's not good enough. I was raised here before, and there should be answers. In relation to Tusla again, the bonding, the taking away of children from their birth mother is a very, very serious issue, because a little baby of 4 or 6 months or 1 or 2 years, and maybe that the mother doesn't get him back for another 2 or 3 years. The bonding that develops between a mom and a child is broken up. And I think Tusla should be going the other way completely to ensure that every option is tried before the baby is taken away or the child is taken away from their mother. I had a number of cases of this, and I'm not at all happy. Now, I have to say there are good people in Tusla, but I don't know who's directing him or who's advising him or who's instructing him to do this, because I don't believe it's fair and fair on the bonding between a mother and a child to take them up and to break up the family unit, because the mom and the child is what we know to be a family unit, and they have to be protected at all times and ensure that when they start on the right footing, that's what they stay. I'm sorry.
These statements here tonight, and I said last week when they were called for in the Dail, was just a brinksmanship and a showmanship from the government trying to get one over on Sinn Féin. Nothing more as naked and as blatant. When there are children in state care, children who have gone missing, and children who have been failed by Tusla and failed by this government, and shame yourself, you'll be not trying to score points. Of course, anywhere there's children abuse or anything wrongdoing, and it should be. And I heard the Deputy O'Donnell, I want to compliment her on her statements on how she has dealt with the issues that she's talking about. I want an investigation into Tusla's involvement and the lack of involvement in many issues, but in the family court, in the case of a 4-year-old boy whose custody was given to his father, who was sentenced last Friday, the father was, to 7 years in prison after he pleaded guilty to neglect and obstructing the apprehension of the person he knew to have murdered the child. Think about this, just about it. I mean, it's shocking. If we had any moral compass in here, we wouldn't be allowing this to go on. And Minister O'Gorman is protecting Tusla at all costs. Deputy Tóibín has outlined it there. It's a shocking situation. Mr. Justice McDermott said he was satisfied that there was a clear and disturbing pattern of abuse of the child, who was isolated from members of his family and was subjected to frightening forms of assault. Roger Government has failed to renew the tender, and that's another issue, has failed to renew the tender of Child Law Project that has been reporting in the last decade on goings-on in Tusla and the family courts that was only costing 200,000 a year. And he can't fund this, and he can give money 1.1 million extra to Tusla, who are failing and failing. And the blackguarding they're giving families in this state, I know about it myself, the families that meet, they're given, and vindictive people working in that organisation, and blind eyes turned by the Minister for Children. The President of the District Court, who wrote to Roger Government telling him that the suspension of the reporting of the project was the most unwelcome development. That's the project, the only project, for some reason, that would report this. For some reason, the media won't report this. 70 children have gone missing in state care in the last 5 or 6 years. We saw the investigation in Cork where they were being taken out of their care and brought into hotels used in a brothel. A shocking, disgusting behaviour, and we have children's rights and we have everything else, and that's going on, and people are being taken every day of the week in family courts from their mothers, and the rights to birth mothers are denied, and they can't raise it in this Parliament. It's a sickening cover-up. That's what we're talking about, not allegations over and back against who scored 2 and who scored more.
With respect to supporting families, the government is failing very badly. I've been trying to highlight repeatedly in this Dáil the way that the supervised access system is being exploited by unscrupulous private companies. It illustrates the failure to support parents and the failings in the public system. Current and former access supervisors, as well as parents, have contacted me to explain how this has become an ethics-free exploitation zone for profit-hungry private companies. Unlike every other European country, we have no public supervised access service. It's exclusively provided by private companies. So the state, in the form of courts, say the only way you're going to see your kids is with supervised access, but the state refuses to provide any service for that. Private companies are the only ones who provide it. Parents have no choice but to pay large sums of money to private companies to see their children. I have a costings list from one of those companies, Supervised Access Ireland. The rates are €34.75 an hour from 10 to 6 Monday to Saturday, €44.50 an hour on Sunday. If a parent wants to see their child for 4 hours, they have to pay between €139 and €178. It's more than a third of your weekly wages if you're on the minimum wage. It's up to 3/4 of your weekly payments for someone on job seekers allowance. On top of that, some private companies are additionally overcharging parents. One parent forced to use the services of Supervised Access Ireland said they had to pay for a 3-hour visit when they were getting 2 hours, they had to pay for a 4-hour visit when they were getting 3. It's hard to comprehend this as anything other than a state-sanctioned form of ransom, and a very profitable ransom at that. Supervised Access Ireland charges parents more than double what they pay supervisors in their wages for the equivalent time. And it's children as well as parents who suffer from this. Kids cannot see their parents because the parents cannot afford the extortionate fees that the private companies charge. I asked the Taoiseach about this last summer. I asked if any financial assistance could be provided for parents. He replied, it is the responsibility of the parents to pay for access arrangements, and they are obliged to pay private companies for this service. I acknowledge the stress that this can cause for families. So the Taoiseach acknowledges the stress for vulnerable kids missing their mother, missing their father, but he doesn't propose to do anything about it despite having a €25 billion surplus. Bear in mind that children in access situations have already lost a significant amount of contact with their parent, and now the state is standing over a situation that makes it harder for them to rebuild their relationship with parents that want to see them, that want to rebuild their relationship. It is cruelty by the state to the children. To make matters worse, the service being provided by some of these private companies is substandard, to put it mildly. Employees have told me, and I quote, "Workers were hired and sent on shift without any face-to-face interviews or even the most basic of checks. In more than one instance, an access worker was sent out without any Garda vetting being done, as well as not having appropriate checks with regards to indemnity insurance. This was allowed to happen with vulnerable children who are in the care of the state all over the country and facilitated by the company to maximise profits. They maximise profits at the expense of the safety and well-being of children." When I raised this scandal in parliamentary questions to the Minister, he claimed that Tusla ceased using the services of this particular company in February 2024. However, Tusla records show that they have paid the same company over €100,000 for their services for this year in 2024, which would be a very, very large sum if they were only working for 6 weeks. I also have it on good authority that supervised access jobs are still being advertised by the company in question. Perhaps the Minister, if there's a sum up at the end, could address this and at very least pledge to investigate it. If the government is serious about child protection and is not just using it as a political football to score points, it must actually act to fix the broken child protection system.
Children in state care and those known to state care are being trafficked and sexually exploited in Ireland right now at a serious scale. In other countries, this would be a national scandal. The resources of those countries would be marshalled instantaneously to deal with the issue on a comprehensive basis, and there would be accountability. There would be resignations at the very top. So the ministers, when I brought up the issues of hypocrisy, some of the ministers in front of me had puzzled, quizzical faces. Well, I'll get to the specifics of this. Special emergency accommodation arrangements consist of unregulated accommodation in this state, mostly by third-party providers in rented accommodation. They are being used by Tusla to accommodate children in state care. And we know from reports in the media that there are serious question marks in relation to the vetting of the people working in these areas and the providers of those special emergency arrangements. There is a shortage of foster placements coupled with a consistent underfunding of private and voluntary sector, which has made Tusla more reliant on those dodgy companies to protect vulnerable children. Children in state care, particularly residential care, are being left hugely exposed, Minister. Child sexual exploitation is the biggest form of human trafficking in Ireland at the moment, and it's happening in real time amongst children that are supposed to be in the care of this state. In the past number of years, we've had a number of people trying to expose this. And because of the way that the courts work with in-camera rules in this country, it is virtually impossible to expose the fact that the government are letting down these children to such a level. But I'll give you an example where it was exposed. We had a courageous judge, Judge Sims. He raised his head above the parapet. He wrote a damning letter and gave 3 reports to Minister Roderick O'Gorman. Shockingly, the Minister has confirmed to 𝐴𝐴 that he shredded those reports on the basis of GDPR. 3 reports that outline the horrendous experience of children in state care in this country, written by a judge and given to a minister. He got permission to put the information into those reports by the people concerned, and he redacted those names. And the Minister for Children felt more responsibility to deal with GDPR rules than he did for the protection of those children. Damning indictment on the actions of this government. At least 70 unaccompanied minors have gone missing from Tusla since 2017. And we have a situation just in the last year where a number of unaccompanied minors, some who had come to this country without parents or guardians, but known to Tusla, have been left homeless in Dublin for weeks. Tusla have been unable to tell me how many children each year are being physically or sexually abused in state care, saying the data requested is not centrally collated by Tusla. Tusla are not even collecting the information in relation to abuse that children may suffer in state care. They've also written to tell me that they do not maintain or register of referrals to Corú of allegations against staff members. Separately, the Department of Justice has told me that records of emails received by the email address blueblindfold@gardaí.ie, to which people can make reports of suspected human trafficking, are retained for no longer than 30 days. The emails are deleted after 30 days. This is extremely alarming information. Tusla tell me as well that the number of children, Tusla can't tell me also that about the number of children who have become pregnant while in state care, or the numbers who are referred for STIs testing in state care on an annual basis. And the government are trying to blame the lack of resources in relation to this, implying that it's also something got to do with the refugee crisis. This is not true. The problems run deeper and they stretch back for years. And Minister Roger O'Gorman, following a Dáil question on this topic, was unable to give me clarity on the number of children who go missing from state care. Not just unaccompanied minors, but each year the number of children that go missing. Imagine, the Minister for Children cannot tell this Dáil the number of children that go missing on an annual basis from state care. Where is the child protection instincts of the government in relation to this? You know, I've met with members of the voluntary sector, the foster care sector. They tell me about the significant investment that's needed. They tell me about the fact that they are unable to do their jobs because of the government's lack of investment. In the month of January alone, 22 children went missing from state care. Imagine, previously a 14-year-old girl was abducted by a criminal gang within minutes of being placed with Tusla, and she was found in a brothel a year later. Now, I would really ask the government, on the day where they're trying to occupy the high moral ground here, at the day when they're politically sinking the knife into the opposition, I would ask them to look at themselves also. And I would ask them to look at the hundreds of people who are significantly damaged by the fact that this government will not act. And I tell you, this is happening to a group of children because they have no power. They are from poor backgrounds. They have nobody with wealth or influence to speak on their behalf. And that's why this issue is so much under the table and doesn't receive the priority of discussion in this chamber. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why it's not being fixed. And I would ask the government, if they're real about today, to be real about these children too. 𝐵𝐻𝐵.
That approach of not using this as a political football lasted for as long as Minister O'Gorman was speaking, and then all the subsequent government speakers, in reality, were all about using it as a political football. That's why we're debating this today, shamefully, is for the topic to be used as a political football. And I think most people around the country are quite unhappy to see that this is how this issue is being treated. I'm not interested in engaging in that. I'm interested in raising some very serious issues of child protection that are the responsibility of this government, a government that has had the power to remedy all of these serious issues for the last 5 years, had the power really for 100 years between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and has chosen not to. A government that has the biggest budget surplus in the history of the state, and that has chosen not to remedy the serious child protection failures which are ongoing across the state right now. It tells you a lot about where the government's priorities lie, which I believe are not with child protection. Instead, it's with corporate protection, protecting the interests of big business and the wealthy in this country, and to hell with everyone else, including particularly vulnerable children. The Ombudsman for Children said last July that the state should ask itself how it has fallen so far that it is unable to provide a highly vulnerable child in the care of the state with a safe and stable place to live, a social worker, a trusted adult that they know will care for them. And he answered that question, a combination of government intransigence and neglect. That neglect is obvious when you look at how children in the care of the state and in the care of private companies, contracted and paid for by the state, as well as families themselves sometimes having to pay, which I'll come on to, how they are being treated. The Child Law Project reported last July that judges are in despair over the lack of appropriate places for children in care, and that this is having a domino effect that risks collapsing the care system. One judge warned that the lack of places is a tsunami about to reach shore and nothing is being done. He said it was only by the graces of God that some of the kids involved were still alive. And the government's response? Not to deal with the crisis in the childcare system, but to end funding for the Child Law Project. To shut down the only public source of information we have on the childcare system. Researchers have not been sent to observe court proceedings since June because funding for the project has been axed. We have reference in the Minister's speech about a new reporting system, sharing the opinion that court reporting is important and, quote, should be retained into the future. That would give the impression that it's happening right now. It is not happening right now. It needs to be reinstated. It seems that it will be several months, at least, before a new reporting system is established. We need a date. We should have had a date from the Minister today about when this vital reporting would be re-established. Fears that children without an appropriate care place are at risk of death is well grounded. Last year, 29 young people in care, in aftercare or known to Tusla died. 23 died in 2022. And the reality is that those tragic deaths are only the tip of the iceberg. What lies beneath is a maelstrom of under-resourcing and state neglect. The crisis in childcare places is now so bad that vulnerable children are routinely being warehoused in Airbnbs, in holiday homes operated by private, for-profit companies and staffed by unqualified attendants. Of course, the companies involved are making a tidy profit. Primetime reported last May that 166 minors were left in this type of unsuitable private accommodation. Shockingly, that includes babies, it includes toddlers and preschoolers, as well as older kids. Conditions in some cases are so bad that charity workers and social workers have been left in tears after visiting the children. Of course, the government knows all of this. This is not news. It chooses not to fix it, despite the billions available to it. It chooses not to improve wages and conditions for social workers, not to finance the construction of purpose-built, appropriate care facilities, not to support families so as to prevent children being taken into care in the first place.